right. Good morning, Lee. Great, thanks for sitting down and doing oral history of the history department. We're also doing this with the help of the Friends of Historic Germantown as well. It's one of our projects for the year. So thanks so much. Can we start with your full name?
Full name is Leland A. Crawford.
And who are your parents?
Parents, Raymond Rockefeller Crawford and Nora Teresa Allardyce.
Tell me a little bit about growing up in Germantown. Where was your parents' house?
I was born in a house down on the river. Dennis, my brother, is living in it now. It belonged to my grandparents, who I think once my parents got married, they moved into the center of Germantown and left the house for my parents to move into. And I think my parents thought their job was to fill the house with kids because there was one after another that followed through.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 6 siblings. Yeah. Just to give you a little picture of, my oldest sister was born in 43 before my father went off to the war. And then when he came home, the Crawford started appearing, the Crawford kids started appearing. Ian, 46, Ellen, my next sibling, 48, Raymond, named after my father, was born in 50. See if I got that right, I think. Raymond was born in 49, Timothy in 51, David in 53, and then the straggler came along, Dennis, in 56. Yeah. That's the siblings. And along with that came a host of dogs and, and relatives and so forth.
Was it crowded in the house? Like, did your father have to put additions in the house?
Interesting. It was originally built, I think, as a kind of a summer house. And once the tribes started arriving, my father realized this isn't big enough for us. And he began the process of rebuilding from the summer residence to a full-time house, full story. And there's a lot of stories around the rebuilding. You got a bunch of little kids, all probably under 6 years old, always curious of what the carpenters were doing. And I just remember his name was Johnson. I can't remember his first name. Great carpenter. And he had 2 or 3 guys in the crew. And I remember pulling my father aside and said, "You got to control these kids. They're climbing all over this place." And sure enough, Timothy was up on the roof ridge, walking along. I think he must have been about 3 years old. And the rest of us, were always underfoot in the rebuild of the house. That was a neat time. We really kind of regretted losing our old home, but the new home we quickly settled into, and the boys had the upstairs and the girls had the downstairs with my parents. And I think my father did that for a reason. He had the boys' bedroom up over their bedroom. So at night, he could always hear the patter of feet. You guys get back in your bed.
Tell me a little bit about your father's occupation.
Dad, when he was younger, I know he ran outboard motorboats on the Hudson River. They had races up and down, I think it was Albany to New York or Albany to Kingston. Used to race those. And then he'd take them up into the Adirondack Lakes and race them up there also. We've got some old trophies at the house that, he took first place or second place or whatever. And then he went into the war. He was in the armored division. Was a lieutenant in the tanks. Started in North Africa, across North Africa, and then jumped into Sicily, and then went up the Italian peninsula, and ended up in Anzio. I can't remember the name of it. It's
He was at Anzio Beach.
Anzio, yeah. And then there was this big monastery up there, and I visited it not too long ago. That was a fortress that the Germans stayed in, and they powered the daylights out of the thing. Just, it was so difficult to get into. And interestingly enough, he met a bunch of his compatriots or people he knew from the county in Italy. And they went, hey, who's here? Rome.
So you were talking about your father was at Anzio Beach.
Anzio Beach
elsewhere.
and elsewhere. But he did meet a number of guys from Columbia County while he was in the war over there, and they toured Rome, got pictures of him on the top of the chapel in Rome. Dad talked about them capturing these German fortifications, and which were wineries, and everybody in the tank would jump out and go through the wine cellars, helping themselves during the war. But while he was there, my uncle, my mother's oldest brother, was in the war, and he had been captured, and he escaped from when he was in a concentration camp in Poland, escaped and got to Italy. And he met my father. He was nothing but skin and bones, I remember Dad saying, and he took my mother's side of the family was very strongly Catholic, and he wanted to see the Vatican. And my father took him to the top of the dome in the Vatican, and they got pictures of them and looking all over Rome. And the other friend of his, Herm Music, Herm was in supply and would make sure that Dad had whatever he needed for his little tank battalion. Just tell me what you need and I'll get it for you. And another little sideline of that was after I went off to college, her music was in Detroit, and I went and stayed with them, and they helped me get into Michigan. I went to University of Michigan. Had a good time, I call them relatives out there then. Then Dad came home, I'm gonna say 1942 or 43. Because that's when my oldest sister Chippy was born in 1943. No, wasn't coming. That was before he.
Before.
Yeah, before he went. Yeah. I came along right after he got home. And then the succession of other Crawfords came along after that.
Your father got into building trades and
Yes,
lumber.
when he got back, I don't know if he started working for my grandfather, who started the lumberyard. And that lumberyard was originally started down on the railroad tracks. And I think it was under the name of Pulver.
Yeah, yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah.
Well, Isaac Pulver Rockefeller, I
Yeah,
think, is where that Pulver name.
That's where the P comes in, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I think it was Isaac P. Rockefeller who started that business down there.
Mhm. And at some point, he moved it up where the,
Palatine Park Road.
yeah, Palatine Park. Leland, Crawford and Son. I don't know, is the sign still on there?
I
I think-
don't know if the sign is still there at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that probably Andy took it down once he bought the place. Yeah. But shortly, I think Dad started with, we call him Poppy Crawford, probably in the late 30s. Then signed up in the war, and then once he came home, he was a permanent fixture at the lumberyard.
No, he later became a contractor, a general contractor, builder too, or no?
No, and I can't remember if it was before or after Poppy Crawford kind of bowed out of the business. Dad wanted to venture into building. Probably an expansion of, if I could sell some more lumber, and so forth. So he had a piece of property down by the Legion Hall. And it's a good piece of property, and he decided to build 3 houses. One was a contract built house for a fellow that worked at IBM. I can't remember his name. And then there were 2 other homes alongside of it that he had stick built. And there must have been some expansion going on in Germantown about then, because those houses were popping up everywhere.
But those 3 were the first.
The first 3 and the only 3 that he ever built.
Okay.
Yeah, other than our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you describe the building of your own house a little bit? How it got changed from being a little cottage?
Oh, yeah.
Into the house. We already had.
Yeah. We talked
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your mother. Your last name was Allardyce.
Allardyce. Mommy, as we call her. First name was Nora. She was, her education was nursing, and it seemed, as growing up as kids, everybody in Colony County knew who Mom was. Because she did work for the state health department in Hudson. And
Allardyce? Allardyce? Oh, your mother.
my mother, yeah. Yeah, well, she was a Crawford then. I don't know whether it was probably to help hold the family together or feed the family, I should say. But with 7 kids, you needed some sort of support. And being in nursing, she knew what was needed. The health department was always organizing throughout the county, the vaccinations and shots and who the doctors were and that sort of thing. And even in the later years, after I had left town, there were still people coming in from the surrounding towns to get shots from mom for either immunizations or if they had some sort of an illness that needed continual shots. There was always somebody in the kitchen getting the shot. And
Do you know if she charged for that? Was that a charge?
no,
It
no,
was
this
always a
was-
freebie, right?
oh, it was always a freebie. Yeah. And the other thing I want to make everybody aware of, she was the best cook in Columbia County. You know, how she ever fed 7 little mouths. We never went hungry. And she always encouraged us while we were in school to bring somebody home. If you think they're hungry, bring them home and we'll have them for dinner. You know, we're not going to eat them for dinner. We'll just feed them for dinner and send them on their way. And as I was playing sports in high school, fairly frequently, after we were away on a game, I'd bring somebody home because they didn't have a ride and or they were waiting for a parent or somebody to come and pick them up. We'd bring them home and sit them around the table and feed another mouth. My mother always had enough food, you know, to get us. And the Crawford kids were never little skinny, scrawny kids. They were always well fed. I think I'll look at myself and David, and Timothy, and Raymond. We're all pretty well fed, even to this day. And she, being a nurse, she really knew how to cook and prepare the right kind of meals. I mean, it was always meat and vegetables and that sort of thing. Oh, and the neighbor, Bill Rogers, was always at the table.
Was it?
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. Bill Rogers and another one of my classmate, sport mates, and Albert DeSalvo, Glenn Snyder. Who else? Anyway, there was always another mouth being fed at the table.
One story Bill Rogers tells, that maybe you remember too, is walking across the ice on the Hudson River.
Oh,
And then you described that.
yeah. That's one of the many stories we never told our parents what we were doing. Of course, just below the house was the railroad tracks, and I finally put the fear of God and was never cross those railroad tracks. As a side note, my grandfather had a fruit farm down there, apples, cherries, peaches. No, the peaches were in North Germantown. Pears, and we wandered through the apple orchard and got down into we called the waterfalls down by your house. The Grants lived down there, and I don't know what got me into it. It was Ellen, Raymond, and Timothy. I don't think David was with us. I said, let's go climb the waterfall. And I got them part of the way down to the bank. And they weren't gonna go any further. And they started crying and screaming and the people that lived on the other side of the brook came out, what are you kids doing down there? You know, and they helped me get the rest of us down onto the railroad tracks. And I guess they must have called my father because he came down. Not too happy as I remember, and brought us home. But I don't know, I kind of wonder whether David and Ellen remember that escapade with me and taught me a lesson. Never take them anywhere I was going.
So,
Because all they're gonna do is get me in trouble.
so the question though was, did you cross the river when it's frozen?
Oh, yes. Billy Rogers and I quite often ventured out onto the ice. Both of us knew, and his father told him, I don't want you near those railroad tracks. His father worked for the railroad company. I don't want you anywhere near that railroad track. Well, you know, it's just a challenge for kids, you know, a couple of boys. And one of the times, there was a couple of us, probably Raymond and Timothy. I don't know if David was with us or not. I said, you know, we can go out on that river. It's okay. And we did. And I didn't realize how far out on the ice we were on. On the east side of the river, it was shallower and the ice was usually pretty thick and not broken up very often. And I don't remember if Bill was with us or not, but in any event, we got far enough out on the ice, you could see us from the house.
Oh.
And I don't know whether it was my mother or my father saw us first. They panicked, you know, came running down across the hill. You kid, get up here. To get our attention, my father had a pistol, you know, and he shot it off to get us our attention. And, you know, started hollering at us, get back here, get back here.
So you never went all the way across.
No, we never went all the way across. Well, there was always a channel there and the boats frequently enough went up and down so that there was an open water section. I don't think anybody ever got all the way across.
Bill tells a story about you. You and him walked all the way across to the other side to Greene County, and then the cutter boat came through the channel, opened the channel, and then you guys had to walk all the way up to the Rick Van Winkle Bridge and then back home.
Well, you got better memory than I do. I don't remember.
Was that when they were teenagers, would you say?
Oh, I had that. Yeah, yeah. We were always down along the river.
Did you have boats as a teenager or young man?
No, not when I was a teenager. Dad did have an inboard boat that he finally let me, and he kept it up in the Catskill Marina. And we'd sneak across and get on the boat and go up and down the river. Having fun. I don't think if Bill had a boat or his parents had a boat, it wouldn't have been any more than a rowboat, I don't think. Always wanted to race on the river like my father did, but never did. All he ever had. We did have, he had a hull of a boat that he had down by the chicken coop. But by the time we came around and we could have sailed it, it was pretty well rotten, so we never did.
So did you already talk about ice boating?
No.
Ice boat, no.
So
No.
he used to race on the ice. That's what you.
Yeah, he did. I never did. It wasn't until Dad told me that he had raced up and down the river with ice boats. But the channel was open enough during the winter that the ice wasn't very good for ice boat racing. He said, you don't know how easy it was back in the day, and there was a lot of ice boats out on the river. going up
Easy in
and
what
down.
respect? What do you mean?
The ice was better.
What, the ice was better?
Oh, yeah, the ice was better, and you didn't have the tankers going up and down the river, breaking up the ice.
Hmm.
It was thick enough, and I'm guessing, just looking back on it, that different winters you wouldn't get as cold, therefore you wouldn't want to be out there on the ice. And particularly if there was commercial traffic going up and down the river, it was always breaking up the ice. Pretty dangerous, I would say. Yeah.
To get back to your mother, can you describe the house she grew up in? In Northford? Did she ever talk any?
Oh,
Got it.
no, she grew up in Hudson.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she was originally from Hudson. And they had a huge,
3-story, 4-story,
what's that?
3-story or 4-story house, right?
Yeah, 4-story. Big old house in Willard Place. Right next to the Catholic school, which she went to, St. Mary's. She never talked a lot about it. We've got pictures of when Chippy, my sister, was born in 43. Some of her sisters, my mother's sisters, were still at home, and they would help. I think I'm mixing things up here a little bit because Chippy wasn't born to 43. We got a lot of pictures of first child and aunts all holding them and playing with them and that sort of thing.
So what's the connection with the house in Germantown?
What was the connection?
The
Allardyce house.
The Allardyce house. Northford.
Oh, that didn't, well, no, I can't say that. I was gonna say that didn't belong to the Crawfords, but it was Poppy Crawford's farm. He had peaches up there that were pretty, so I was told, pretty popular in town, and he'd ship them to New York. Most of the fruit, as I remember, in Columbia County, was a big fruit. Back in the day, it was a big fruit growing. And I think that's how Poppy Crawford kind of got started in the fruit growing business. And several of the other farmers around town would ship they would either drive it by truck or bring it down to the railroad and put it on cars and ship it south to New York City.
Now, do you remember, from what I understand, there was a series of droughts in the early to mid 1960s, and that hit what farming, what fruit farming was still left in Germantown pretty hard.
Yeah, I don't remember. That. In mid 60s, I left and went off to school, forestry school, first to New York State Ranger School for a year, learn how to be a forest technician. And after 1 year of that, I mean, it was isolated. It was up in the Adirondacks. It was just small school. We had 60 classmates. Their focus was forestry, technical forestry, and surveying.
What was the name of that school?
New York State Ranger School. it's still that name, but it's affiliated with Syracuse. And it was almost, if you got good grades at the Ranger School, it was almost automatic you were going to Syracuse. Well, I had a couple of teachers at the Ranger School who came out of Michigan and influenced a few of us. Syracuse is okay, but Michigan's better, you know, and wandered off. But I don't remember any droughts or serious weather in the area as I was growing up. The one thing you could always count on is you could see the weather coming over the mountains from this side of the river. And you at least had a little preparation, get ready, batten down the hatches and close the windows and
So, but the house, Allardyce house up there in northern Germantown, didn't an Allardyce live there?
oh, yes. My grandfather passed it on to one of his sons, Uncle Douglas. And when Poppy Allardyce retired, they wanted to come out of New York City and come up the river and live in and around Germantown or Hudson, which is where he originally started his career with the cement plant in Hudson. So they were looking for a place to live, and Uncle Douglas owned Perry. It was called the Perry Place. Uncle Douglas said, I'll rent it. You want to live there? And they were happy. Poppy and Grammy Allardyce moved in and they started a garden and they were planting.
So I have a picture of her when she, on her wedding day or whatever, close to her wedding day, but also
Grammy
Allardyce.
Allardyce.
How long did they live at the old Greek house?
Oh, Lord. It seemed like it was forever. Had to have been 15 years. My grandfather passed away first, and then Grammy stayed there after he died because it was close and Mom was close. And one of the things that we always looked forward to as kids was after Mass on Sunday, somebody got chosen to go to Grammy's to have pancakes, buttermilk pancakes. We always said David was a favorite of hers, and he quite often got to go first for the pancakes, but she made the best pancakes in the world. Sunday was always a fight, who was going to get to go to see Grammy and have pancakes.
So are they buried in the cemetery here in Germantown?
Yeah, they're up on Cemetery Hill. They're on what I call the new side.
Which is all filled up. They're burying people on the old side.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are they turning over the graves? I was wondering whether they were going to move into what I used to know as Jekyll Farm, which was.
Yeah, I think the cemetery was a field that hasn't been used.
Hasn't been dug up yet. Yeah.
To get back to your father's side of the family, did your dad ever tell stories about some of your ancestors, like Captain Phil Rockefeller or Isaac P. Rockefeller, or any of the town history?
No.
Related to them?
Any of that history I got from Grammy Crawford. Surprisingly enough, I don't know a lot about her family. As a kid, I mean, I look back on it now, why didn't they ask more questions about that Rockefeller side of the family. But all I knew was she had a sister that lived right next door to her in town. Trying to think of what her name was.
So did she have a brother?
Grammy?
Grammy's Edith, right?
Yeah, Edith Crawford, Rockefeller, Edith Rockefeller. Yeah. No, I can't, I guess I think she did have a brother who died young.
Yeah, I think so. I think she had one brother.
Gotta find him to get him to.
Okay,
Yeah.
but before your time,
You know,
long before.
well, and the thing that surprises me is Granny would take me up to the cemetery and we'd walk through the iterations of Rockefellers that are up there. Yeah, and I can only once remember her talking about her younger brother. And I'm not sure, I don't know what his name was.
Raymond?
Raymond Colby.
Colby?
Oh, Raymond Colby?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you remember more than I do. And that's where Raymond Crawford came from. I guess I can almost remember Grammy telling me, your father's named after my brother.
Okay.
Um,
So,
Now, one other thing about Lower Main Street, do you remember, so the creek that runs parallel to Lower Main Street,
mhm.
it's usually dried up in the summertime.
Is that the one with the falls on it?
Yeah,
Okay.
there are falls. Do you ever remember a mill pond further up?
Oh, in town.
Closer to 9G,
oh,
but on, west of 9G, but only by a little bit. Do you ever remember any remnants of a mill pond on that small creek?
no, what I do remember is up in town, there was the pond, the ice pond, and that's where the ice house was. And one of the stories either Grammy or Dad told me was that, no, it was my mother's side of the family that was in the ice selling business. And one of the relatives who owned an ice house and sold ice to New York City had gone to the Chicago Fair and had seen a refrigerator. And he said, our business is limited days coming. I'm getting out of the ice business. He came home, sold the whole ice business. Everybody said he was nuts. And shortly thereafter, right after the turn of the century, refrigerators took off and he made a bundle, because it was at the peak of the ice.
So that would be the Allardyce side of the family?
That would have been the Allardyce side of the family. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but I remember Grammy Crawford telling me that there was a big ice house up on the pond in town. And how many years did we as kids go up there and go ice skating? I think Bill, Rogers and I, and there was this creek that went up in back of the pond, and it was always a challenge. How far up can you go with ice skates on and not fall through? And we usually came home wet.
Do you remember the ice house that was there, or was that torn down?
I remember seeing some skeleton parts of it.
Okay.
There was sawdust everywhere, which was used during the ice, keeping the ice. But I don't remember much of the structure. I've seen pictures in the past. I don't know whether Grammy Crawford had them or somewhere I saw them in one of the town pictures, whatever. Yeah.
in your adventures along the railroad and the river, did you ever go down towards Chevy Landing? Or
No,
stay mostly in
I
the Main
mean,
Street area?
our parents, I think both Bill's and mine, put the fear of God in us. You don't go near those railroad tracks. And I understand now that with the speed of the trains, that's even more of an issue. And you
They,
don't
they
want
go,
to be,
they go about 90 miles an hour through there, and they
Yeah.
don't blow the horn at Main Street because there's no crossing there anymore. So that,
in Tivoli. there's
no, at Main Street, there's no crossing there anymore.
Oh,
So- so
yeah,
they'll-
yeah,
they'll Go 90 miles an hour through there and not blow the horn.
yeah.
That's right next to you. Oh, they don't, that's a good thing.
That's right under your hill.
Yes.
Yeah. There's still a crossing up at the Anchorage, though, isn't there?
Anchorage and Chevy
Yeah.
have crossings, and
Yeah.
they blow the horn pretty loudly there. Were there any other old stories about like your grandfather Leland Crawford? Do you remember him at all? Do you remember any stories about him?
Oh, yeah. Two things I remember. He was one of his favorite things to do during I think it was the spring of the year. He would go up to Canada to go fishing. Dow Hover. And he had a couple other friends from town. All I remember is Dow and Poppy going to Canada. And they'd be gone a week or 10 days. And they'd come back. And Poppy was a big fan of the Packers, the car. And he'd come down to the house, he'd open the trunk, and these whales would be in the back of his car. I mean, they were 40, 50-pound lake trout that he and Dow had pulled out of Lake Gananoque, I think was the name of the lake that they fished on, right on St. Lawrence.
And they were packed in ice?
They were packed in ice, yep. But what I remember is these newspapers. He'd put the newspapers over and he'd open the trunk and he'd say, "Come here, look in here." And he'd throw the newspaper back and this whale was in the back of that boat. And we had, I mean, 40, 50 pounds of lake trout. We had fish for a long time after he came back. He and Dow had his trunk full too. And just being Catholic, Friday night, we were gonna have lake trout or some other fish. Mom would prepare. So that was his trips to Canada. And we do have, I think, some old pictures of Aunt Janet, Dad's sister, who went to Canada with Poppy Crawford. Dad never said he went to Canada with him. I'm not sure whether he just never made mention, or I don't think my father really liked fishing because he never encouraged it in any of the boys. Yeah, if we did it on our own. So Aunt Janet would go out, and I assume Uncle Douglas went up with him on a trip or two. Grammy Crawford, I can't envision her going to Canada, living in the rough. That was not her thing. So trips to Canada, Poppy Crawford, and then Poppy Crawford had a big vegetable garden across the road from their house, right behind the Reformed Church, I think that's there in town.
Where was their house is on Main Street?
Their house is on Main Street, you know where the Catholic Church is,
Yeah.
right across whatever church that is.
Yeah.
Being good Catholic, that's the other religion over there, But behind there, I'll bet you it must have been 4 or 5 acres worth of, every year Poppy Crawford would have it plowed up and he'd plant corn and all kinds of vegetables. I don't know whether he was doing it to help feed our family or whether he just liked farming. And of course, it was a place to put the Crawford boys as they were growing up to keep them out of trouble.
Yeah.
My father would send us up to weed in Poppy Crawford's garden. And then as the season got older, you go up and pick peas and bring peas home, or corn, or tomatoes, or whatever. But he had this huge garden, and it was just, I spent hours weeding the rows in the garden there.
Was there anything that they would do for insects, infestations of insects?
I don't remember.
Anything like that? Okay.
No, I take that back because they had a little garden across the street alongside the barn there. And I do remember Poppy using some sort of powder to get rid of bugs. So if he used it there, he must have used it across the street. I just never saw him. And he probably didn't want us near. Yeah.
Do you remember the railroad station in Germantown?
Railroad station?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I got on a train down there.
Oh,
With my other grandparents being in the city. Not frequently, but on a number of occasions, we went down to the railroad station, got on the train and went to New York City. And then it started not stopping very frequently, so we ended up having to go to Hudson to get on and go to New York. Yeah, that's all I can remember.
Do you remember anything about the interior? Anything, any details about the station?
No, I mean, once I went into that one and then you went into the Hudson one or any of the others, they all looked the same to me as a kid, you know. You had to go to the ticket counter and get your ticket and hop the train.
Where were you in 1971? Were you in college?
I just married and I was in Tupper Lake.
So you would have not known, been around for the train derailment.
No, no.
Were there any train derailments? Well, when you were a kid in the 40s, 50s, 60s?
Train.
Train derailments in Germantown.
No, I don't remember. Bill would talk about his father going off. Yeah, having worked on the railroad. They had a derailment up north of Hudson or down toward Kingston or whatever. But I don't ever remember when being on this section of the railroad. Bill could probably tell you more about that.
Yeah.
His father would have been involved in it. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about going to Germantown School?
Oh,
Your favorite teachers and all that.
yeah, GCS, Germantown Central School. Rose Matone was a kindergarten teacher. And I mean, as a 5-year-old, all I can remember, battle axe. And I don't think she was 4 feet tall, but she put the fear of God in every kid in that class. You didn't step out of line when Rose Matone told you to do something. And as I got older, got to love her. I mean, she was such an institution in the school. And what I remember about the kindergarten, every afternoon, I'm guessing shortly after noontime, lunch, we had to take the cots and put them in the floor. We all had to take a nap, take a sleep, and nobody, at least none of the boys wanted to take a nap in the afternoon.
Did you actually have cots?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
because we always had rugs, that's why I was.
Still have cops in my time.
Yeah. Do they not have cots? No.
You know, and I
I
can't,
didn't notice, I don't know.
I can't remember where we kept them, you know, in the classroom. I mean, they had to have been fairly close
I
at
think it's
hand.
that. I think that's how they did it.
Well, they were like army cots, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
they fold up so they could
Oh,
be stacked, you know, I guess that's the way it went. I just don't remember us, you go get your cot and put it here on the floor.
Who were some of the other teachers you enjoyed?
Okay, and then first grade was, who did I remember? I think it was Mrs. Lasher. And she was influential first grade, fifth grade, and I just adored her. She, you know, she was strict, but she was always encouraging you to learn something. Margaret Lasher. What a gal she was. I just, you know, I would even come back when I was in high school. I would want to see her at Christmas time. And Mom would bake a cake or something, cookies, Christmas cookies. We'd take whoever we had teachers for. And Mrs. Lasher, she was a wonderful person. And she made you want to learn. So that was first grade. And then second grade was Mrs. Fraley. Oh, yeah. Another one of those. She looked like a tyrant, but she wasn't. I mean, she just made you feel like you belonged in there and you wanted to learn. And she taught us all. It's about when you started to learn to read, beginning the process of reading. And she was a fabulous teacher, just a fabulous teacher. Don't remember ever getting ruled during her stay.
Did you get your wrist slapped a few times? Along?
Not with Mrs. Fraley, no. And I would have thought maybe with Mrs. Lasher, but no, she was too stern. You know, she reminds me of a sergeant in the army. You know, you didn't step out of line and you knew exactly what you were supposed to do. And probably some of that came from Rose Matone. I mean, she controlled her class, and I'm guessing there must have been 25 kids at that time.
Yeah,
Were there
some of those classes, those were the first big classes in GCS.
Did they have
Prior
assistant
to that.
teachers or anything, teachers' aides or anything like that?
Are you kidding? And I do remember it was somewhere around the second or third grade that Dad said, I'm going to tell you boys, if I hear anything about you in school, whatever you get, you're going to get twice as much when you get home. You know, so we weren't going to step too far around the line.
So they did do corporal punishment, that's what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it was in fifth grade, and there's a couple of us, it was recess. We were all outside playing on the snowbanks. It was in the middle of the winter. And, you know, we weren't too bright because it was right in front of the nurse's room. We started throwing, and it was a capital punishment for throwing snowballs. And 3 or 4 of us, you know, were throwing snowballs at each other. We heard us bang, bang, bang on the window, and the nurse is going like this. And next thing you know, Mr. Mortensen, principal, came out. You, come with me. And we know our destiny was, here comes the rule. You know? And sure enough, he lined us up in his office. Bend down, grab your ankles, and he had this hickory stick on the backside, you know, and everybody in the,
Just once.
yeah, I only remember once.
Oh,
I may have been too numb after that. I wish I could remember, because it was whoever it was with me had already been in there more than once, and he knew what was coming. I had no idea, but I knew that we were in trouble. and
So the question is, did you get whacked again at home? You don't remember.
I don't remember. I don't remember. And I'm sure I wasn't about to tell my father, you know. But I didn't realize that Dad, every so often, would come down to the school, because the lumberyard was only a couple hundred yards up the road from it. He'd go wandering through the halls and would look into the classrooms where we were. And he would ask at the dinner table, what did you do? What'd you learn in school today? Nothing. I know you learned something. You have to tell me, you know. And if we didn't recite something that he had overheard, you weren't paying attention. You weren't paying attention, you know. So you didn't step out of line too long. And somehow he would hear about what David had done in class or what Raymond had done. Timothy was the one that was always in trouble. And, you know, we'd get the grilling at the dinner table, you know. You know, it was time for corporal punishment. That was when you got it. You know, you stepped out of line. Yeah, those were, but I thinking about school and the grades and the classrooms. I think I have been in every classroom that was in that old school. As the classes got bigger, our classes got bigger, they kept moving us around inside the school system, inside the school building. I've been down in the basement, I've been up on the third floor, I've been all over on the first floor. And so I got to know it real well. And then when they started expanding the school, that would have been in the 60s, 70s. No, I wasn't around 70s. It had to have been late 60s. They did an
I think
expansion.
it was like 65 or so.
Yeah,
They did.
So when did you graduate? What year?
I graduated in 64.
Graduated high school.
Yeah,
But there were multiple areas of expansion.
yeah. I mean, I just know the school population was mushrooming during this probably mid 50s, 60s.
What were the school lunches like? Did you ever have a school lunch?
School lunches. Everybody, Crawford boys were never known for being meager eaters, you know, and there was some kitchen staff, the cook, Mrs. Oakey, and Mrs. DeSalvo. Of course, Albert, her son, was in my class, and I don't know, she always took a favor to the Crawford boys and made sure we never went hungry. And if it was something she knew we liked, spaghetti and meatballs. You want another meatball? There you go. You know, not everybody got that. She was marvelous. As I said, the Crawford boys never went hungry at lunchtime.
So you didn't have to bring your lunch. You always had a school lunch.
Yeah. Always thought it was neat that somebody could bring sandwiches from home. But mom wasn't about to make sandwiches for 7 kids, ship them off to school. I guess as we got older, if you want to eat sandwiches, you make your own, take it to school with you.
So
But,
how did you get to school?
oh, every day it was walk. And we could have gone up our road to 9G and picked up a bus. And I don't know how many times we tried to talk Dad into letting us get on the bus. We all want to go on the bus. You know, what's so magic about a bus? Now, I don't want you kids up near 9G. You walk the old road down to a street that goes up and down to the railroad station.
Main Street?
Lower Main Street.
Lower Main Street. We'd walk out to Lower Main Street and then up Main Street, cross 9G, and then into school. Even when the snow was up to our elbows, you know, we had to walk to school. If it was raining cats and dogs, Dad would come down from the lumberyard, pick us all up, and I don't know how we all got in his little sedan, but he'd pack us into the car and take us to the school. All the kids will remember this. At the end of that old road where it hit Main Street, Larry Bullard, the industrial teacher at school, lived. And Larry got a goose. And as that thing got older, he got ugly. And the Crawford kids would come walking by and the goose would come out and chase us. And we learned that the only way we could get past them was to surprise them. And then we run like heck down to the end of the road. And it got to the point where, okay, the older boys have to stay behind and the girls, Chippy and Ellen, and the little kids would run first. And then the goose would be all excited. And then it was our turn to run. I remember getting nipped by that critter.
How long did this goose live?
Oh, way too long. That's all I can remember.
It's a vivid memory of all of your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, David was one of the lucky ones. He got to run with the first group that ran through. Then it was Raymond, Timothy, and I were the ones behind who had to fight off this. It looked like 100-pound turkey, not turkey, goose. He was walking at it.
Was Dennis part of that group that got to run first?
They got your own.
Was he still too?
Yeah, I guess as he got older, yeah, he must have been up there with Chippy. Because
Did you still have relatives living in those houses near where that road came out onto Main Street? Grandparents or?
No close relatives down there.
We're talking about Main Street
Yeah, Lower Main.
or Lower Main Street?
Yeah,
Lower
where
Main
that
Street.
old road.
Yeah. No, next to Bullard's was Mr. Denninger.
Yeah, HO dinner.
Yeah, and he bought.
Well, his wife was a relative. Yours.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, she was a Rockefeller.
See, things we don't know.
Lila
Yeah.
Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had a pig farm just beyond us. And it was always neat to go up in the springtime and see the little piglets running around in the mud, you know, and then at the end of the season, he'd slaughter the pigs. And you talk about a traumatic experience going up there. I don't know how we knew that the pigs were going to get slaughtered, but we never got there when it happened, but we always saw them hanging up there,
Yeah.
opened up, and yeah, he's starting to butcher them. There was something about Ellen. She really got freaked out over seeing that slaughtered pig. I'll have to ask her about that.
The old road that connected Crawford Lane and Main Street, there was a bridge. Was there a bridge over the creek?
Yes, yeah, cement bridge. I'm guessing that was probably built about the CCC days. I don't know whether it was Dad or Poppy Crawford told me that that was, used to be a main thoroughfare, that road, and then it got abandoned, and I think probably when 9G went through. But that is still there, solid as can be.
Do you have anything else, Yvonne, that you want to?
I'm just coming up with ideas as you prompt.
Oh,
me, so.
okay, all right. Did you have anything else in your notes you want to talk about?
My foot cast, when I was a baby, I had I don't know what the issue was, a crooked foot that was turned in. And as to correct it, they put a cast on my foot to straighten it out. And I had a couple pictures, I couldn't find them, of me with this cast. And I just remember Mom telling me, I'd sit in the playpen and bang that thing, I'd break it. And she said, can't tell you how many times we had to replace that cast that you had, because you didn't like it, it was tying you down. But
I do think I did come up with something. So there's the Allardyce house. There's also the Allardyce house up in Hudson. And you're talking about them living in the city. So what is the connection of all those three locations?
well,
That
the one in North Germantown, Poppy and Grammy retired to, that was owned by Uncle Douglas. It was called the Perry Place.
right.
And it had a fruit farm on it. Poppy Crawford nurtured and grew some of the famous peaches and peach trees up there.
And they moved up from the city.
They moved up from the city when he retired. And the place in Hudson was,
Where they lived because
he worked at Atlas Cement in Hudson.
so then how did they get to New York City?
Poppy was promoted to, I don't know what the position was the vice president or something. He wasn't a finance guy. I think he was operations. He had a pretty stiff rule as far as, at least what I've heard from Graham telling us, nobody messed around with Poppy Allardyce, you know. He had pinched every penny, you know, and he knew how to run the business and make people do what had to be done at the cement plant.
Now, was it at all tied in with the breakout of the war that they moved to New York City?
I don't know exactly when they moved to New York City. It would have probably been about that. Had to been after, because I remember seeing pictures of Chippy. That would have been 43 or thereafter. And they were still in Willard Place up in Hudson. But that was part of the Crawford kids' education of the world, was venturing to New York City, you know, to see the grandparents down there. And I should remember what the address was. Because every time we went to the city, it was drilled into us. Your address, if you ever get lost, is something, something.
Was it Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx?
It was in Manhattan. Yeah, I can't tell you it was east side, west side. So we had an exposure to the city with Granny and Poppy. And then when Mom went to school, she met Aunt Frances Skelly. They became close friends and they lived in Brooklyn. So if we didn't go down to New York City, we were going to Brooklyn. And I was a godchild of Aunt Frances. So I kind of got favorite treatment, you know.
And
But,
how did you get to New York City?
Occasionally we would take the drain down, or in Aunt Frances' case, they drove up and took us down.
You went, were
we
you
talked a little
sent
bit.
down by yourselves or did an adult always come?
There was always somebody. And I don't know about our dresses get untrained by ourselves.
I'm just thinking, what did people do in those days? I don't know.
Yeah, you were always with one of your grandparents or parents. Visiting the city was an experience. Poppy and Granny lived up on, I think it was the 6th floor, and they had not a balcony. We called it a outdoor space that you could, when the weather was nice, you could be out there. And you were forbidden to get anywhere near the wall that went down to the street. So, you know, as a kid, Grammy looking, I want to see what's down there. And I don't know what made her do this. She took us shopping one time, and I remember buying this little bow and arrow. You know, it had suction cups on the end of it, and I couldn't wait to practice shooting arrows. And they had this wall, some sort of a wooden wall as a partition between the space that you. I put up a little target. Said, you know, I'm going to shoot the bow and arrow at that thing. Well, I had no idea how to shoot a bow. So the first arrow over the, and all I could think about was, oh my God, that went over the roof. It goes down on the street. Did I kill somebody down?
All right, Leland. Thanks so much for talking to us today.
Oh.
Is there any other last thoughts?
Parents, we talked about the parents.
The pool. Did you talk about the pool already?
No. Which pool?
The pool that was by
Oh, the Flowell.
Flowell.
Well, that was Billy Andrews, Flowell, yeah. No, we were sort of told, stay away. It just, I think more from a safety standpoint, don't want your kids near the water. And Poppy in the lumberyard got to supplies for sure. Oh yeah, Larry Bullard, the shop teacher, would let us, on occasion, if you needed supplies for whatever the project you can walk up to the lumberyard and pick it up and bring it back. And he always put a time on it. You better be back here in 40 minutes. So we didn't dilly-dally and wander off. And I suspect he might have even called my father and said, you know, kids are coming up to get some supplies, be ready. You know? And they get turned around and yeah, I talked about the county being an agricultural center. Orient school. Oh, I didn't finish all the good teachers that I had. Mrs. Bartolotta, Weber. Something the same. He was a 4th grade teacher. And Billy had Mrs. Henderson, I think, 4th grade. But Mr. Weber had been in the war and he lost an eye. And I remember one day during the year that I was sick, Mr. Weber took his eye out and showed it to the class. And I missed the most exciting thing that could have happened in the year. And he apparently had a thing about doing this with each one of his classes, because there was kids after us remember him doing it too. But that was New York history was his subject that he really got us interested in. And then again, Mrs. Lasher, that was 5th grade. 6th grade was Mrs. Berger. There's another battle axe. You didn't mess around in Mrs. Berger's class. And then after elementary school, you went into junior high, and that's when I ended up realizing I needed classes, because the English teacher, Mrs. Lee, sat me in the back of the room, and she always put her exams on the chalkboard up front, and I couldn't see anything. And there was a little kid by the name of Richard Campbell who sat alongside of me. I said, I'll make a deal with you. You read me the question and I'll tell you what the answer is. So he would read me the question and I'd think about it, and the answer is, and here it is. But that's when I realized, no, I can't see. And when I got my first set of glasses, before I got the first set of glasses, Billy and I were laying on the lawn up at the house, and Bill would say, see that little building over there across the river? Can you count how many windows are in it? I said, there's windows in it? He said, yeah, those little square things. I can't see those. I guess I must have said something to my mother. She said, I think you need an exam. And Billy said, I can't believe you can't see those. Those are simple. Well, and that's when I started wearing glasses, and I got them. And Glenn Snyder, I didn't want to wear glasses, boys don't wear glasses, girls wear glasses. But fortunately, Soxy Tompkins, Thaddeus Tompkins, was in our class. He got glasses. Glenn Snyder got glasses. I got glasses. I guess it's okay to wear glasses.
Okay,
All right.
time's up, I think.
Yep, good.
Thanks so much.
Very much.
Oh.
Thank you.